Thank you very much for having me here today. Some of what I'm going to talk about today overlaps just a little bit with what you've heard earlier. I was lucky enough to sit through a couple of the earlier panels. You heard from members from St. Johns River Water Management District and Southwest Florida Water Management District. I'm going to talk to you about South Florida Water Management District, which is, as she said, the largest of the 5, so I get a little bit of bragging rights, but also a very unique water management district in that we are responsible for Everglades restoration. So when we talk about water supply in South Florida, we focus a lot of our efforts on the restoration of the Everglades system because that is the backbone of our water supply program and life, really. So think about that as I walk through some of our water supply challenges, that's really some of the focus of what we look at as we move forward in South Florida. You know, you've heard a lot about water management districts today. You know, I find it's very challenging for those of us who come and speak to you guys to only get an hour panel or 40 minutes to talk to you about a specific issue when we could literally teach college courses specifically on why water management districts were set up and how our programs are established and the things that we look at. So remember that as you ask questions and realize that we could go on for days and days and explain the complexities of these issues, but only have a short snippet of time. So I'm going to try and do my best to cover a lot of the issues. But these are really the key focus, or the key mission of the water management districts. When you look at water supply, and we know what a critical piece rainfall is in our water supply. The state of Florida has more water than we know what to do with. Water is not something that we are scarce in. Our challenge is how to manage that water so that we have it when we need it. We have on average 52 inches of water rainfall a year, but we've never had one year where there was 52 inches of rain. So you have that average number, but we never hit average. We either get way too much or way too little. There's a lot of talk this morning about the massive drought that we've seen the last few years. We know we've seen years when we have significant storms which bring a ton of rain in a very short amount of time, and there's no way, given our flat topography, that we can hold on to that water so that we can have it when we have those times with no rainfall. So that's really our biggest challenge is we get all that rain, but how do we keep it and hold it for when we really need it? The graphic on the right-hand side shows you not only do we have periods where we never have that average rainfall in a year, but we have periods within the South Florida Water Management District where we have areas within the district alone where we have significant droughts, but other areas where we have plenty of rain. So even within our own district boundaries, even within our own areas across the state, it's not a stable amount of rain. So it's just a huge amount of variability that we need to manage as we look at rainfall and flood protection and water supply and how all of these complex issues fit together. When we talk about civics and you talk about water, it's important to remember that these things do connect to each other. Water supply and economic recovery or sustainability definitely have a connection to each other. It's not choosing which businesses are going to stay in business or which ones aren't because of water. It's how do you balance those issues and move forward together. And for us, it's all about having everyone at the table and working through those issues together. So I just want to hit on that. As you look at the economic downturn across the country, it's been very painful. And that combination of a weak economy, especially when you look at the extensive drought that we've seen challenges to the business economy. So one of the things that we have focused on, especially in the agricultural industry, that underscores the importance of planning for and developing and looking strategically at our water supplies. And I think all of the water management districts, our governing boards, and our administration have recognized that you've got to have adequate water to achieve each of these things: population growth, new industries, as we look at jobs for you as you graduate, go to college and graduate, you want jobs. So we need to look at new industries, biotechs and biofuels. How many of you think that biofuels are definitely the way of the future and that that's an important thing to look at? Biofuels take a significant amount of water, a lot of water. So on one hand, biofuels are a great thing. It's green energy, On the other hand, it's a huge consumer of water. So these are the kinds of things that we have to balance as we move forward. We've seen our agricultural industries continue to expand and look at innovative things. Blueberries are something which weren't in Florida's agricultural portfolio several years ago. Now we have a huge blueberry industry. Again, they're looking at ways to expand to deal with water challenges, to deal with different challenges that the industry is facing. You're looking at new and hardier citrus trees to deal with not as much water. The industry is changing just like we all change. And then the other thing that we are seeing more of, thanks to people like you, thanks to the hard questions that you're asking, is a concerted effort to look at not just water supply for people, not just water supply for agriculture, but water supply for the environment, to make sure that we're looking across all aspects to ensure that we have a good quality of life, which includes environmental water supply. Water supply plans are our key way that we look to ensure that we have available water to meet all of our needs as we move forward. You've heard a lot about this already, so I'm going to sort of flip through a lot of these. But for us, a key part of the success of these plans is ensuring that we have public participation throughout the process. That includes not just the specific utilities that the water supply plan impacts, but also agriculture, as we talked about, at the table, helping us come up with solutions, but also key stakeholders, people who represent the environment, people who represent different stakeholders, golf courses, nurseries, all of the things that have a piece of the pie need to be at the table helping us come up with strategic solutions. When we talk about water supply planning, there are different things that we look at. The first step, the number one step, is projecting future needs. This sounds easy. You wouldn't believe how many different ways there are to project population growth, or how many ways there are to project changes in water supply demands. But it's our first step in accurately projecting future water supply demands. But it's not an exact science. We start with medium projections. The University of Florida Bureau of Economic Business Resources, called BEBR, if you ever hear that term, that's what that stands for. But we also look at long-term trends and recent trends in the different industries. And we work closely with industry experts for all the categories of water use and recognize that information, especially projections, can change over time. I think one of the interesting things that we've seen is from 1950 to 2000, you see a typical growth from water demand. It's typically grown faster than the population growth. But in the last few years, last 20 years or so, or 10 years, you haven't seen that growth in water supply demand as high. A lot of that goes to water conservation. We've talked a lot about water conservation. What we've seen is that a lot of the water conservation practices that have been put into place were the really easy things. How many of you turn off the water when you brush your teeth? Excellent. Very easy to do. Great message, easy message to teach little children all the way growing up. Those are the kinds of things that actually have a significant impact on the amount of water, positive impact on the amount of water that we use. Those are things which you've done which have greatly reduced the amount of water that gets consumed every day in your household. Irrigation, watering lawn irrigation in your yards. Those are all water conservation things which were very easy to do to a point. Now we're getting to the hard things. So whereas you've seen water demands getting better and our population going up but we're not using more water, we've now lost that easy lift. So you're going to see an increase in the demands going up. I think this just shows some of the pie chart shows several important trends that we're going to see over the next 20 years in South Florida. This is just South Florida. Note that there's an increase in public water supply and with a decrease in agriculture. That doesn't mean that agriculture is going down in terms of demands. It just means that public water supply is going to increase faster. So we're definitely seeing an increase in the overall projection of water use that we're going to need. But it's just a shift in where that larger demand is going to come from. In terms of the other section, this sort of shows you where that other is. So we have public water supply, domestic self-supplied, commercial and industrial and institutional self-supply, agricultural irrigation, power generation, recreational landscape irrigation. Landscape irrigation, don't always think yards, because the majority of our yards are on reuse water, but we have soccer fields. I mean, there are other things which require landscape irrigation or water, some type of irrigation, again, mainly reuse. But then the key thing that I want to point on this is the background of the slide, and that's your environmental water supply. Protection for the natural system. We heard talk this morning about minimum flows and levels. Another protection which we use a lot in South Florida is water reservations. When we build a project for environmental restoration, and it creates sort of this new water, so it's a restoration of a site. It captures new water by keeping water on the site. We reserve that water for the environment. So that's a different term as opposed to a minimum flow and level. And restricted allocation areas where we don't allow additional withdrawals from an aquifer. Once you identify the need, then you identify the water source options. This just shows you some of the different options that are out there. You know, in terms of the typical traditional sources of water, your freshwater groundwater and freshwater surface water have typically been the cheapest. Therefore, they're the ones that have the highest demand. But these are some of the other resources that we have looked at. In South Florida, again, 90% of our water comes from groundwater, only 10% is provided by surface water. We think in South Florida, our liquid heart is Lake Okeechobee. It provides, even if you're getting groundwater, that canal system and Lake Okeechobee really provide that aquifer recharge, which your wells need in order to stay productive and stay healthy. One of the things which we have focused on in South Florida, it meshes very nicely with Everglades restoration, is the need for storage. When you look at significant canals, I know I've got some Westwood, Fort Pierce high school students over here. When you think about the canal system in South Florida, we lose a ton of water to tide. It just goes straight out those canals, straight out into the Indian River, out into the ocean. That's good water. That's water that's just lost. We have to send it off the land because of flood protection issues. It just, again, drops so quickly in rain. We got to get rid of it as fast as possible. We need to capture that water and hold it because that's a great resource. It's relatively cheap, and we need to make sure that we've got it for when we need it later. Some of the other things that we're looking at, again, are stormwater capture. I've talked about that. We're looking at a big reservoir in Palm Beach County, is C51. Reuse water, we talked a lot about. And then as we develop our plans, what does that look like? You've got limited sources. What are the costs of technologies? We talked a lot about cost benefit. That definitely goes into the development of your plans. Are you looking at regional water projects, local projects, or more water conservation? And then what are your strategic drivers? That gets all wrapped up into your planning process. Throughout the entire thing, of course, you have collaboration and coordination between your local governments. We have a special stakeholder group that provides guidance or input to our governing board called the Water Resources Advisory Committee. The utility councils have groups that they work through, our ag groups, and then other stakeholders. And the bottom line, we don't plan for people, we plan with people. So I encourage you, I heard the question, what can we do? I encourage you to follow the process and get involved. No matter what level of government you engage at, it's important to remind your elected officials and your government agencies that you care. And that you have a vested interest in your future and your children's future, which hopefully you're not thinking about yet.
I missed out on this morning, so I know you guys had a lot of great topics. I've heard that you all were asking great questions. Thank you so much for being here today, because it shows me that the young people here in Florida care about the environment and where we go in the future. That's really important, especially important to me. I have a great job. I work for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Our agency has 4,000 people strong who feel passionate about what they do, and it's a great job to have. I'd like to see a quick show of hands real quick. How many of you plan on pursuing jobs in the environmental field, maybe after college or after high school? Show of hands. That's it? You guys come all the way down here? I don't see more hands than that? Well, hopefully I can get you all encouraged by the end of this presentation. You know, the Department of Environmental Protection, you think that we just might be made up of biologists, but really, we really do have all sets of professionals that work for the agencies. We have engineers, we have geologists, biologists, chemists, we have lawyers, we have accountants, we have network analysts and environmental specialists. There's a lot of opportunities for an agency like ours for people to work there. And I hope you'll consider coming on board with us in the future. That's my plug there to try to recruit some good folks. In the district office where I'm from is right here in Orlando. I have about 150 staff, and we're really all about permitting and compliance. We deal with all kinds of waste matters, water, specifically the drinking water and the domestic wastewater, how it's treated before it comes to you, and after you send it back to the after you send it back to the utility. The kind of quality it is in. I just wanted to give you a couple quick shots here of what a day looks like in the eye of our staff, you know, on any day-to-day. Oh, and let's see here. There we go. We get involved with everything that comes out of a stack. Here we got a power plant, but waste incinerators. We permit and we make sure that they're in compliance. These facilities aren't, by the way. Here's a concrete batch plant, and all that dust that you see, we call that fugitive dust. That's not supposed to leave the property. We deal with facilities that have these types of issues. We switch over to the environmental resource side, wetlands and dredging and filling, and making sure that people aren't filling in their lake shores, putting in sandy beaches, things that aren't good for the environment. These are the types of things we're looking at. Here's a driveway that someone put in through wetlands, and again, something that you would try to get a permit for. I'm not quite sure we would permit this, but sometimes we catch it after the fact. This is hard to see, but this is a very serious violation. These are mangroves that someone had cut down, and usually when they cut them down, it's to improve their view of a river or something along that lines. And mangroves are the only tree in the state of Florida that's protected by statute. There's red, there's white, and there's black mangroves all throughout the state, from about Daytona Beach down, and they deserve a special degree of attention. So we're constantly looking for these type of instances. We require restoration. Here's some more dredge and fill. We do all the permitting for docks, single-family homes, all the way up to marinas like this, to make sure that the water body can take what someone's trying to put in there in the way of a dock and vessels. Now we switch gears. We're over into the waste world. We have hazardous waste inspectors, solid waste inspectors. We're permitting landfills. People that own property that have contamination there. Maybe they caused the contamination. Maybe they bought the property that has contamination on it. Our staff are the ones who are working with them to try to determine what the extent of the contamination is and what's the best way to remediate it. Laboratories. Here's a salvage yard. They like to be known as automotive recyclers. And we also go to a lot of manufacturing operations. This is a place that is manufacturing emergency response vehicles. And we see everything under the sun. And here is a domestic wastewater plant. Like I mentioned, we do the permitting and compliance for those types of facilities. But really, with the spring symposium here, following the heels of Melissa, talk a little bit about water, give you all some facts, and I apologize because you've probably been talking about this all morning, but we are looking at 1,800 miles of coastline here in Florida with 11,000 miles of rivers and streams, waterways, 7,700 lakes that are 10 acres and greater. More than 1,000 named springs representing the largest concentration of freshwater springs anywhere in the world. And of those, 33 are first magnitude springs, which is sending up about 65 million gallons of water per day, and that's or more. So we have some significant water features here in the state of Florida, as we all know. More facts. Florida consistently has been one of the fastest growing states in the nation, and I think as we all talk today and start to talk about how we can do a little bit better, this is going to be something that we all have to consider. We have close to 19 million residents today. About 5 years ago, we were growing about 1,000 people a day. With the economy slowing, we slow down a little bit, but expect this will start to pick up. And we have over 80 million annual visitors. And what we have to understand is water fuels both our environment and our economy. As you can see here, Florida ranks #1 as a destination for Americans that want to swim, fish, or dive. So great for our economy, great for our environment, and then we have to find a way to protect that. And if you're looking at these numbers, you can see where there is a significant stress on our resources. So I wanted to engage you guys just a little bit here with a quick question. And I asked Melissa not to give this away, but I know that some of her slides had it. But I'm just going to pick on this gentleman right here because you're closest to me. I'm going to ask you a question. How many, and you probably talked about this earlier today, but how many, look at me, how many gallons of water do we use here in the state of Florida every day? Yes, sir. You don't know? I'm going to go right down the row. Just give me a guess. How many gallons? 80 or 90 million? How many thinks that's higher? Higher than 80 or 90 million per day? How many thinks it's less? I keep hitting these. Okay. Anyway, 6.7 billion gallons of water every day. That is a tough number to swallow. Anybody think that's sustainable at all? No, it isn't. We got to do a little bit better, and I think Melissa's slide showed that here by 2025, that's going to increase by about 30%. So you're looking at 9 billion gallons of water a day that we as Floridians and our visitors are going to be using. So that makes something like the subject of springs very important. This is Wekiwa Springs. How many people have been to Wekiwa Springs? Show of hands. Fantastic. You got to get there. You got to see these things. Senator Constantine and I were talking. We feel that if you see them, if you recreate in them, if you're there, you understand the importance of protecting them. If you're not from the area, as we mentioned, 1,000 named springs in Florida, you can get on our website. You can find where all these springs are located. Maybe there's some close to your home and you can get there. I'd encourage you to go and see them. And here's a picture that someone from our office took. I wish it would show up a little bit better, but these are the manatees that are wintering in Blue Spring up in Volusia County, and they can get as many as 200 up into the spring on any given day. And this picture was taken there. The springs are a vital habitat to a lot of both animals and plants here in Florida, and we've already talked about how valuable it is to our economy. Springs are also a great indicator of the quality and the quantity of our groundwater as well. They're kind of like the proverbial canaries that the miners would take down in the mine to show if there's problems with oxygen. So springs can be a great indicator for us, as in this picture here. It doesn't take much to see that this spring is being impacted by excessive nutrients. And that's where we have to start to get involved and try to flip the proverbial switch and get things fixed. So as my agency, the Department of Environmental Protection, how are we doing that? Protecting the lakes, rivers, and streams. Well, I'll throw an acronym at you. And I haven't forgot about your participation. I haven't forgot about your participation. I'm going to ask for a hand. Does anybody know what this acronym stands for? All the way over there in the green, you're the first one I saw. Stand up. What's this acronym stand for?
Total maximum daily load.
All right. You're getting you are getting a conservation kit at the end. Come find me. It stands for total maximum daily load. And what that is essentially we're looking at all the water bodies here in Florida and determining how much pollution can each of these water bodies hold and assimilate naturally. And anything that exceeds that, then we have to put a plan in place to start to reduce that pollutant loading. And it's just not one individual, it's several what we would call stakeholders that have to play a part in this. It's a phased approach. The first and foremost, we divide Florida into 52 hydrologic basins, and we start working on those basins in 5-year segments. The phases are, first, we're looking at all the data we have. It's amazing the amount of data that we have taken on all of our lakes, rivers, and streams here in Florida. So we got a tremendous amount of data, and we take a look at that, and we find where those problems are or where those problems could be. We enter into phase 2, which is strategic monitoring to verify impairments. Okay, like visually, we just saw there with the spring and the excessive algal growth due to nutrients. Looking at the monitoring data and using some narrative research, we can define what is being impaired. The next step is we're actually going to develop what is that target number. Where do the pollutant loading need to come down below in order for us to achieve success? And once we do that, our Secretary of the DEP is going to adopt that as a very formal standard that we are all going to have to meet. That enters into phase 4. We look at all the stakeholders who are involved with the pollutant loading into that water body or into that basin. And we bring them all to the table and we sit down and we work really hard at what their inputs are and what those solutions may be for reducing those inputs. And once we have that developed, that basin management action plan, then it gets adopted into rule, and that holds each and every one of those stakeholders accountable for reducing their pollutant loading. And then the 5th phase is we flip the switch. It gets adopted, we put it into action, those stakeholders meet on an annual basis, they look to see if what they have proposed and what they've implemented is successful, and it is, we slap 5s and we keep on trucking. If it isn't, we have to go back to the drawing board and see if there's more that needs to be done. I threw in a quick picture here. Out of my office, I have 9 staff that are out every day, all day, 5 days a week, taking water samples from all the lakes, various lakes, rivers, and streams here in Central Florida. They're taking bug samples to see what the diversity is, to see the health of that, and all that gets logged into data up in Tallahassee to help them determine what the health is. We talked a little bit about basin management action plans and how do they work. It really, again, it's coordinating all the stakeholders' actions and projects. What we don't want, because we know it's not as efficient, are a bunch of people working out on their own individually. Orange County, I don't want them working individually without talking to Seminole County and Lake County and everyone that's involved in the process. This has to be very collaborative in nature, and I think as you all move into your careers, that's a very important point. Collaboration, partnerships, working together. You really have to work across the table to solve some of the issues that we're going to have here in Florida. It sets goals and milestones, and it establishes a plan for monitoring progress. Now here's some examples of what's coming through in basin management. Am I out of time? Oh man, I was blown through there. I told, okay. Let's see here. All right, well I'm going to go, don't worry about the commitments. That's fine, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Don't worry about that. I'm going to leave you with this, and it's very similar with Melissa. What can you do? It's very simple. First, you have to lead by example. It's so simple for everybody. Reduce the amount of energy you use, reduce the amount of water you use, the amount of waste you generate, use environmentally good products, both in cleaning, household products, things of that nature. Study hard and come to work for us, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Thank you. I tried to make it.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not going to have any fancy slides. I'm not going to go overtime with my friend Jeff Prather. In fact, I just sat down and took some notes right now. First of all, I want you all to know that you are in the student union of the University of Central Florida, the school that I graduated from. And I'm very proud of that. I also want you to know that I'm a proud Central Floridian. Grew up here, and but I was and always will be a senator for the state of Florida. And I'm just going to pose a question and then answer it as I go along. Question's very simple. Why should we care? Why should we care? I am very fortunate to be the co-chair of the Florida Conservation Commission with a man that I've greatly respected all my life. If any of you have never heard of Governor Senator Bob Graham, the man was a governor for 2 terms, a state senator for 4 terms, or for 3 terms, I'm sorry, and a U.S. Senator for 18 years. He left office with an 83% approval rating. Politicians would beg to have that, I promise you. I served Florida for 18 years in the legislature. And I'm going to give you a perspective of how and why we sometimes succeed, but in recent years we have failed when it comes to what is so vitally important to each and every one of us, and that is our environment. Jeff posed the question of how many saw Wekiva Springs. I was really encouraged because if you know anything about my history, I am passionate about Wekiva Springs, but I'm also passionate about all the springs in Florida. I grew up before there was Disney. I know, that's probably in the 1800s, but my parents took me to places like Weeki Wachee and Cypress Gardens and Gatorland and Marineland and most importantly Silver Springs. Do you know when I was a kid they had this little thing with the glass bottom boats at Silver Springs, and there were so many catfish and so many brim, they would throw a ball of dough in the water and they called it catfish football. The brim would all run up, they would eat as much of the bread as they could before the catfish came and kicked their butts. And then the catfish took off with the bread. And for a 5-year-old, that was the most fascinating thing I had ever seen in my life. As chairman of the State Inland Protection Waters Special Select Committee of the Senate, I had an occasion to visit Silver Springs, as I have for many, many times in my life, just a couple of years ago. They have no catfish football anymore because they have no catfish. The fish that they have are the picosimises, or what you might call Chinese algae eaters, because there's so much algae in the bottom of Silver Springs that it's no longer silver, it's green. That is an icon of Florida that we're rapidly losing. Its flow is down to half its historical level. Why should we care? I'm an environmentalist because I believe in Florida's economy. I'm a Republican. Most people don't think Republicans care about the environment. I care very much about the environment. I care about it not only because it is so vitally important to us as human beings. You know, we can't live without water. But it's also so important to Florida's economy, which you all pretty darn soon are going to be part of. Let me tell you something. Everybody talks about tourism as being the greatest industry in Florida. It's not. Growth is the greatest industry in Florida. When growth goes down, our economy goes down. When growth comes up, our economy comes up. Why do people come to Florida? Not because we have the best strip malls in the world. Not because we have the best housing developments, and they don't move here because of Disney. They come to visit here because of Disney, but they don't move here because of Disney. They move here because of the idea of Florida. Because they sitting up there in western Pennsylvania or northern Iowa or east Tennessee, and they're in a snowstorm, and they see our beaches and our rivers and our streams, and they say, that's where I want to live. And if we don't care about the economy, who is? And we don't care about our environment, who is? Our agencies, what these folks right here represent, and our legislation that protect the environment are under siege. They're under siege by legislators and other folks that think that, you know, we can do whatever we want for the bottom line today, and the heck with the future of Florida. And I'm telling you that issues like the Everglades, Florida Forever, which was our land buying program, I'm very proud that I was the sponsor of both of those bills. The recycling bill, Wekiva Parkway and Protection Act, water resource bills, all in the last 3 or 4 years have been under siege in the Florida legislature under the name of protecting our economy, when in fact they're killing the goose that lays the golden egg. Soon, most people in Florida don't think about water because they turn on their tap and then water comes out. But folks, they'll care, and it's not in the distant future when water costs reach a level that it's very difficult to pay for. And I'm talking about 5 and even 10 times more expensive than it is today. And we don't know how much it would cost to clean up the springs because we've never succeeded, or not clean up, bring back the springs because we've never succeeded in doing so. We have literally, our heritage, we have literally lost springs. White Springs no longer exists. Other springs are soon to be dried up. Understand how important that is to your future and to the water resources of Florida. Sure, we need to use less water, and you know, we've talked about that today, but we also need to look at what we call consumptive use permits and how much water we're giving to industry and cities and counties and individuals, and ensure that the future of that there is a real need for that water over a long-term purpose, and if not, let's conserve that also. We need to get nitrates out of our water system. Nitrates is the major cause of much of the pollution. That and phosphates. Nitrates is by ensuring that we have septic tanks that work. Phosphates, using lawns that don't need as much water because fertilizer is the #1 thing that brings in phosphates. And finding ways to stop stormwater from getting into our rivers and lakes and have holding ponds before they come, after it rains, come flowing into our lakes and bringing all the pollution that was on the driveways. Environmentalists don't win in Florida because of a number of reasons, but I'm going to give you 4 fast. They lose because they're always playing defense. They're always playing defense because it's politically expedient to look, as I said, what the bottom line is today instead of what the bottom line is in 10 years, which will be even more expensive than it is today. It's because of no politicians. People that do not want to come up with solutions because it's so much easier to say no and save the guy down the street 2 cents in their pocketbook today instead of $100 in 5 years. And I'll just give you one last example. Politicians, to make it easier for the industry and the economy of Florida today, get paid a whole lot more than the environmental lobbies. Do you know one person, the director of the Associated Industries of Florida, the director gets paid more than all the lobbyists of environmental interests in the entire state? Water, and this is your future I'm talking about, water is not a commodity. It's not to be bought and sold on the open market like it is in western states. The water of Florida is a public asset. And therefore, I think you heard this morning a lot of people talking about how regulation is bad. Well, when it comes to private property rights and your own personal property, the less regulation, the better. But if it comes to something that we all own, we don't want one individual being able to get profit by what we all own. It shouldn't be called regulation of Florida's waters. It should be called the protection of Florida's waters. It's interesting to note that this is Florida's 500th year anniversary. It is also my county, Seminole County's 100th year anniversary. Why was Florida founded? Found, not founded. Why was Florida found? A conquistador was looking for a spring. That's why it was founded. The fountain of youth. That is our culture. That is our heritage. And that will be your legacy. We have 20 million people in Florida today, nearly 20 million people in Florida. When I moved here, there was 1/3 of that. 1/3 of that. They're saying that within 50 years, we're going to have 40 million. Jeff already indicated the amount of water we use today. If we don't do, and we are under siege with that water right now, if we don't do something soon, water costs, as I said, will be so expensive that will be one of your largest bills every month when you all go out in the real world and have to pay for yourself. We need people right now that are going to carry this torch. I saw 3 people raise their hand that were going to work in an environment. Whether you work in the environment, environmental issues or not, it is so important to your future. Your future. We need people to pick up this torch. We need passionate people who care about the environment that they live in, who care that their water resources are plentiful, who care that their water is clean, and who, even though we are saying don't think about it now, but think about the families that you will have in the future as far as what you want to give to your children. Florida is a precious, precious place. And it's up to each and every one of you to protect it. Thank you very much.
Is there any way we can avoid, prevent sinkholes or like...
Sinkholes? I'll let you guys answer
Yeah.
that.
We got. Well, I told again, Jeff Prather with DEP. We have several specialists up in Tallahassee that's all they do, and what you find is a lot of things that we're talking about today. The more that we pump groundwater out of the ground, that can cause sinkholes. So I mean that's. I know a couple years ago, back when we had quite a few over the wintertime over here in Polk County during agricultural or some of the agricultural uses, weather was cold, they were watering a lot, and ended up compromising the integrity of the limestone up underneath it, so we had more sinkholes. So there are individuals that study sinkhole activity in Florida, and one way to hopefully limit the number of sinkholes is trying to keep a good supply of groundwater up underneath them.
I noticed you guys talked a lot about, like, I think it was consumable water permits for companies that use that kind of stuff. And what I wanted to know is, do you guys plan on changing anything about those permits to make it so they can't just consume however much water they need? And how you plan on doing that? What do you plan on actually doing?
Yeah, it's consumptive use permitting, and again, you have the executive director of the agency, so I don't actually write permits and negotiate permits, so forgive me, I'm not the technical person. You had the technical people on the panel before, but I will tell you that the consumptive use permitting program is a very detailed program that constantly goes through revamping to look at ways to incorporate additional conservation measures. Every time a utility, actually our next panel, we might be able to get into this question as well, a utility comes in for a renewal or an increase in consumptive use, they have to demonstrate that need. So there's a very technical test that you go through to demonstrate the need for the water. It's not just a check. Okay, they said they need it, they get it. It's a very detailed process. And frankly, a negotiation that goes back and forth between the regulatory agency and the requester. So it is a very difficult and arduous process, and we will continue to look at that, especially as challenges like on the springs issue and in our water supply planning processes continue to get fleshed out. We will continue to ratchet down and focus on ways to better conserve water resources.
In regards to management practices commonly used across Florida, what are some of the negative effects that may not have been intended when the management practices were initiated or were known about, and then thought to be less significant than if we were to just let it go on as it was? Does that come from the management practices?
Well, I don't know whether you're talking about water management practices in the district or the DEP or anything, but I'm just going to start from the very beginning. A gentleman who was a very good governor other than this, called Napoleon Bonaparte Broward, back in the 20s, decided that the Everglades was nothing more than a big swamp that he wanted to fill so we could sell more land in Florida and bring people more back from the north, down from the north. That one decision has caused the young lady next to me and many, many other people, including almost every legislature since, from having to figure out how we were going to restore the Everglades, and it's cost us and the taxpayers of the United States billions of dollars to this point. Billions more will still have to be spent, and even at that, I believe we will never get more than half of what the Everglades used to be, approximately in water flow. So if you ask me historically what was the greatest water management mistake, that probably is the top of the list.
Thank you very much. And thank you to our distinguished panel. Please let's give them a round of applause.
I talked in general, but that was pretty close, wasn't it?